If you had told me back in 2015 that I would actually dread a new Witcher release, I would simply not have believed you. Witcher 3 was everything I wanted in a video game. It had a great main plot line, side quests that either tied in well with the rest of the game or were just really good fun, and it also had really solid lore that felt like a genuine continuation of the book series. I don't think I'm alone in saying that it was the games that led me to read the books. Nonetheless, I love both the books and the games equally, and I thought I would feel the same about the TV series. I anticipated it being a wonderful bringing to life of the books, and I was realistic about my expectations. Of course, it wouldn't be exactly the same. Of course, the showrunners and producers would be just doing an adaptation, and there would of course be artistic license. We'd seen this before in other fantasy adaptations. The Lord of the Rings is the perfect example. It is not the same as the book, but it captures its essence. It always felt like Peter Jackson understood what Tolkien had intended with his writing, and therefore, despite it being a condensed version of the books, it became a classic and led to a sort of Tolkien renaissance. I honestly don't believe that Game of Thrones or The Witcher would have been made if Lord of the Rings hadn't been such a success. When The Witcher was first announced, we were assured that it was being made by people who loved the world and were on the side of the fans. Oh, how quickly that changed. The series has basically offended fans of the books and games so much that even our enjoyment of the books and games has dropped off, and that, to me, is a real shame. Frankly, sometimes it's not just disappointment but anger at how bad the situation has become, and that is the purpose of this week's video. A huge rant about everything Netflix has done to completely ruin The Witcher. And if my anger at the series isn't enough, well then this video also welcomes back Mrs. WiseFish as a writer, because Mrs. WiseFish is an avid reader and enjoyed the book so much that she was persuaded to join the video gaming world as a consequence. Starting off with absolutely no gaming experience, not even enjoying Animal Crossing, she then used the pandemic wisely to complete Witcher 3 5 times over before lockdown ended. She's been a video game convert ever since. She loves the Witcher universe so much that she actually sat through the entire TV series again to thoroughly analyze it for this video, and be warned, she is not happy. It also should go without saying, but I have to say it anyway, that this video does contain spoilers for the TV series, books and games, as well as our own opinions, and if you don't agree with them, that is totally fine. You're entitled to your own view. Just accept that this is my view and my wife's view as well. So with all that said, let's actually get into it and get into the reasons for why I feel Netflix destroyed The Witcher. It's always best to start at the beginning, and in my opinion, the first series of The Witcher wasn't that bad. It wasn't perfect, but I felt like it was at the very least a good start with good promise for the future. And boy, was I so naive in thinking that. Looking back, there were glaring red flags that have plagued the series and only gotten worse. The worst thing by far, for me, is the monoliths. What on earth is the point? They even made a spin-off series called Blood Origins in order to hammer us over the head that monoliths are a thing. Why? Well, because the showrunner Lauren Schmidt decided they would be, and that is literally it. They add absolutely nothing to the show, and the way that they are constantly shoehorned in is beyond annoying at this point. Just when you think the series has forgotten about them, up jumps Istrid, looking increasingly stressed, probably because his work is pointless, to remind us that monoliths are the key to everything, apparently. This is a classic example of TV show writers believing they know better than the original author, and there's really no excuse for it. Game of Thrones had already been criticised for this very issue by the time the first series of The Witcher had been made. Honestly, it felt like Schmidt just had an idea for a show about monoliths that she couldn't get off of the ground, so she took a perfectly well-established universe and decided to change its fundamental lore for her own ends. And perhaps I'm just being cynical, but I really can't see any other reason that monoliths are a thing in this world, and not just as an aspect of the series, but actually being made to the foundations of the whole Witcher universe. It's also really annoying that the author doesn't seem to say anything about this change in the lore. He has such a major problem with CD Projekt Red's introduction of the schools for the Witchers and goes off massive rants about them, trying to sue them for changing lore or whatever he wanted to sue them about. But when it comes to actual things like the monolith, which is just completely ruining the whole series, he just stays quiet about it. And that's just infuriating me. It just shows that he really has a problem with the gaming world, in my opinion anyway. And this complete disregard and self-serving decision so early on should have been the biggest hint that when the fans had innocent yet genuine constructive criticism of the first series, they would, like the lore, be completely ignored. During the first series, I think Monoliths were more of a confusion to fans rather than a concern. The biggest issue was the season's portrayal of time. The three main narratives of Geralt, Yennefer and Ciri were all spanning different time frames, which some fans didn't think was clear enough to really work, and the pacing was a bit odd. Personally, I didn't think it was too big of a deal, and as all of the timelines converged at the end, it felt like it was just a teething problem. But wow, did the producers of the series take a small criticism really personally. In season 2, Jaskier is even made to address it head on, actually insulting fans, saying they can have a go at writing it themselves. It was a totally out of proportion bit of defending, made worse by the fact that the timeline issue didn't even apply to the second series, so why mention it at all? Just leave it as it is. Why not just let the issue remain in the first series alone? You don't even have to touch it ever again. Whoever greenlit that particular scene made the whole production come across like they were just spoilt children who had never been told the word no. They had decided to make a TV show that they knew would be a success because of an existing fan base, and as soon as that happened, they told those very same fans that they didn't matter at all. Honestly, how any of them made it this far in television production is a mystery, if that has been their attitude throughout their whole career. Now, you might disagree with me on this point, and that's fine, by the way, we're on the same side, but season 2 was for me the worst of them all, and I might argue that season 3 and season 4 have been rather desperate attempts to backtrack and restore some credibility, but none of the other seasons have ignored the source material as much as season 2 did. Monolith, it seems, was just the beginning. Mir was arguably the Witcher TV series' undoing. I remember interviews from the time that there was a desire for the show creators to include more Polish folklore, and Baba Yaga was chosen because she had certain similarities to the Three Witches storyline from Witcher 3, which had been very popular and very creepy, and was arguably the best storyline in the Witcher world, in my opinion. A hybrid of these two witch tropes was therefore created, and the show called her Mir, or Deathless Mother. The witch's idea worked very well for the setting of the game. Stuck in a ransacked Velen, Geralt and Ciri found separately that the witches had taken advantage of the desperate situations the starved and battle-weary peasant folk had found themselves in, and this storyline itself was inspired by Hansel and Gretel, with the trial of treats being reversed to lure children to the witch's home in the bog, where they would be used to prolong the lives of the witches, to put it mildly. It was a good example of a common aspect in folklore of evil beings preying on the fear and desperation of those who had only known sickness and famine. But the Mir plotline of the TV series didn't really resemble this much, and although based on Polish folklore that was again conveniently forgotten about by the show creators when she was randomly made a rider with the Wild Hunt, I mean, what the hell's that about? Now, perhaps I'm a stickler for staying true to the lore, but this was an absolutely ridiculous conclusion to that season. The Wild Hunt, mentioned in the books but primarily shown in the games, is supposed to be a group of elite and formidable elves from another world, not an old woman from a forest. It was utterly bizarre, honestly, and really demonstrated how little the show creators understood the material they were trying to bring to life, especially as they made this main plot and conclusion of the whole season. I think for a lot of fans that the second season made the whole show irredeemable, and I don't really blame them. As I said earlier, there should always be room for artistic license in any TV adaptation, but it has to contain the essence of the original version. Netflix decided that the best way of doing this was to kill off Eskel. A brother of the School of the Wolf, Eskel is mainly beloved of video game players, meaning that he is supposed to outlast all of the material from the books. To make the fact that he was killed off worse is that he was killed off in a totally unbelievable way to the lore. Eskel is a witcher, meaning he has received the same training and endured the same trials as all of the other witches who have famed the continent over their skills at killing monsters. But apparently not Eskel. No, he encountered a Leshy or Leshen and completely forgot that they are killed by fire. Thus, he ends up being possessed by said Leshy, and when he is eventually killed by a conflicting Geralt, Eskel had been reduced to appearing as an amateurish bystander in the story, what my Star Trek fan dad would call a token nonity. Actually, with that said, I think the show makes all of the witches bar Geralt out to be complete amateurs. Most fight sequences with them in, they fight like just regular warriors with just a touch of magic. Vesemir is made to look like a real fool sometimes, especially in seasons 2 and 3. Not once did I ever see the experience of Vesemir on show or the ferocity of some of the younger witches. Honestly, if I didn't know about what the witches were, I'd have just thought they were just regular paid mercs, not heavily mutated warriors. Clearly the writers at this point wanted us to be shocked and feel like the rug had been pulled out from under our feet. Ooh, edgy, they probably said smugly around the writers' table. The fans won't know what to expect next, they said as they high-fived each other, I imagine. But whilst it was a surprise decision, it clearly wasn't a very brave or confident one. They have essentially given Eskel's future role to Cohen, making the sting of Eskel's death feel just obsolete. This isn't the only time that Netflix has decided to kill off characters early. The characters of Riance and Kira Metz both seem to have fallen victim to similar problems in production. In season 2, as in the books, Riance is a pretty scary mage. Although clearly a puppet for Vilgefortz, his characterization was pretty good by the actor who captured his literal embodiment of playing with fire quite well. And for whatever reason, this actor didn't return for the 3rd season and was then recast. The new actor was fine, but it felt like the writers just couldn't be bothered with him anymore, so killed him off. And again, for someone quite skilled, it was embarrassingly easy to do so, and again rather insulting to how he was originally written. In the books, he is lured by Ciri onto a frozen lake. Knowing only how to attack with fire, his powers become his own undoing, causing him to fall through literal ice. Ciri is merciless, as he just about clings onto the ice by his fingertips. She slices through them neatly with her ice skates, plunging the fiery menace into frozen oblivion. It's pure poetry, but that seems to have been completely lost on the producers yet again, who just cut off his head. That's it. He's done. Cut his head off. Done. There's no poetic license here at all. Kira Metz is another character that was killed after being introduced the season before, and like Riance, it just felt like the show creators didn't really know what to do with the character in their unique vision. However, I will give the writers some credit for non-canon character deaths. Both Margarita and Istrid dying in episode 6 of season 4 actually worked really well, and I think that is because their deaths served a purpose. Neither had particularly large presences in the book, so fans probably aren't too upset by them being killed off, and the important thing that the writers finally got right was that their deaths served a real purpose, as mentioned. There needed to be some real sense of jeopardy and tragedy in the battle between the mages aligned with Yennefer and the mages aligned with Vilgefortz. It had been building throughout all of season 4, so the writers would have kind of been wrong not to kill off anyone in this situation. Istrid's death in particular felt right for the character and the way he'd been built up in the show. Sacrificing himself to the very monoliths he had dedicated all 4 seasons to felt reasonably fitting, and his confession to Yennefer that it was right as he had been the one who had unknowingly given Nilfgaard and Vilgefortz the key to understanding them and exploiting their power felt very fitting, as I say. Although I don't like the monoliths as a plot point at all, I will concede that in this case they were actually used pretty well. It seemed that with the death of Istrid that the show creators were finally understanding how to write a good Witcher series. But don't worry, that illusion won't last, because in the same breath that they proclaimed that Istrid must die, they also killed off Vesemir. I can't fathom why they needed to do this right now. Istrid's death was moving enough, so really having another main character death rather distracted from Istrid's noble sacrifice. Now, I know that it can be argued that the games are not canon, but you'd have to have a heart of ice to not be affected by the conclusion of the Battle of Kaer Morhen leading to Vesemir sacrificing himself for Ciri, only for Ciri to be so broken-hearted by her dear Uncle Vesemir's death that she let her powers truly rip and took out the remaining forces of the Wild Hunts that hadn't already escaped. It's not in the books, but I think the producers of the TV show got it really wrong to ignore what was to many a defining plot point of the entire franchise. His death was messily dealt with as well, essentially forgotten about by the other characters who were understandably mourning Istrid, which again proves the point that there was really no need to kill Vesemir as well. His death, if it were to happen in the show at all, should have at least been witnessed by either Ciri or Geralt for it to have a true impact. It would have really shown off Liam's acting style as well if it was in front of Geralt. Someone had nurtured Geralt for those many years. And don't even get me started on the fact that that same night Geralt gets told by Yennefer that Vesemir is gone and killed by Vilgefortz, his reaction is to have sex with her? Who does that? I refuse to believe this is how anyone would react to such devastating news of the loss of what is essentially Geralt's father figure. And even for Yen, she lost 3 people, and somehow she's in the mood now? This felt so tasteless, honestly, and so unnecessary. As a viewer, not that I was actually interested by this point, but if I were saddened by those deaths, to then be plunged into a long sex scene would just feel so much more uncomfortable to me. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. It just felt so unnecessary. I have wondered if Vesemir's death in particular is actually signaling the beginning of the end of the TV show. I know they have already filmed season 5 and are saying they will be having a break afterwards, but I think think we all know what that really means. In Season 2 and Blood Origin, the Wild Hunt were really teased as being a bigger thing to expect in the future of the series that has by Season 4 seemingly been entirely forgotten, which makes me think that the TV show wouldn't go beyond the books into the games, and that it will reach its conclusion in Season 5, which would explain why Vesemir was deemed expendable now. This still doesn't mean his death was written very well. If the poorly executed deaths weren't bad enough, the writers also butchered various plot twists from the books. We discussed earlier the importance of Rience to the story, but in the books his presence is an annoyance to Geralt as he doesn't know who he is working for. Yes, Geralt has the same problem in the TV show, but the difference was that we, the audience, weren't having to puzzle it out too. The books left this as a mystery until the Thanedd coup. The show couldn't help but blurt it out at the end of the first season when they showed Vilgefortz murdering his own in the aftermath of the Battle of Sodden. We know throughout the whole of Season 2 and 3 that Vilgefortz is playing the mages, in particular Tessia. And whilst we could feel pity for Tessia, all shock at his final reveal was completely taken away, and this also took the sting out of Tessia eventually taking her own life as a result of not seeing the truth and putting the other mages in danger. I don't really get what was wrong with leaving the audience, in particular those that had only ever known the Witcher universe at all through the show, to try and figure it out with the characters. It's a very common trick that writers use to keep people tuning in, and I don't really get why they didn't use that to their advantage at all. It's like if they showed the meeting before the Red Wedding with the Lannisters that they made a deal to get rid of them, and then during the Red Wedding we're left with when's it gonna happen. It kind of doesn't work that way. You need that shock, and these writers just don't seem to know how to do that. On the same theme of giving away too much of the plot too soon, I like to add that the writers seem determined that we not be allowed even the possibility to forget important plot points. For example, did you know that Geralt and Yennefer really love each other and can't keep their hands off each other? Well, don't worry if you had forgotten that fact, then at least once or twice every season you'll be reminded. Why is this an issue? Well, it completely misses the point of one of the most important themes of the books: loss. In the books, Geralt and Yennefer's love is established in the two collections of short stories that the first season is based on. They part badly, not too dissimilar to what happens in the TV show at the end of the Dragon episode, but then they don't actually see each other face to face again until just before the Thanedd coup. After that, they don't see each other again until the very end of the book series. And the truth is, they don't need to see each other all of the time. The love they have for each other can endure separation, and does. The games understood this with the whole quest for Geralt to get his memory back. Although of course this depends on individual choices made during Witcher 3 as to whether their love was true or not. What this added to the books was the concept of loss and separation due to war. Both Geralt and Yennefer had to keep going on faith that the other one was okay. They didn't know where each other was or how to find that information for most of the story. But in the show, Yennefer is able to portal into Geralt's storyline anytime he needs a pep talk or she's feeling a bit sad. This is annoyingly convenient and completely defeats the point of Geralt going on and on about how much he misses and worries about Yennefer if she can just pop back into his life whenever she pleases. The real low point of this was the dear friend montage at the beginning of season 3, where they were on the run with Ciri, but apparently not talking to each other directly, only by letters where they addressed each other as dear friend. This was particularly taken from the books, where Geralt is unsure about where he and Yennefer stand after their latest breakup and addresses her as his dear friend in a letter. The difference being that he actually had to send her that letter because they weren't together. Doing the awkward letters and them being together at the time was just odd and made them seem like immature teenagers rather than a genuine co-parenting duo. Thinking again about keeping audiences gripped like they should have done with the Vilgefortz mystery, it would have also added the intrigue of the show to have Yennefer and Geralt be truly separated by the war and the different paths they had to go on to save Ciri. If you think about in Game of Thrones, the Stark children were all separated until Sansa found Jon in season 6. That meant for 6 whole seasons the audience were teased with any of their potential meetings. Arya turning up just after the Red Wedding, Bran in the tower unable to reveal himself to Jon. We were gripped for 6 years wondering if they'd ever meet again. Did any of us forget this fact? Of course not. So why did the writers of The Witcher show not give the audience any credit at all with understanding the physical separation of Geralt and Yennefer? My next point is contentious and it certainly doesn't apply to everyone cast in the show, but what is it with some of the acting? Both of us WiseFishes briefly worked at a drama school, and I remember one of the most fundamental tenets of acting was, if the audience can tell you're acting, you're doing it wrong. Clearly some of the actors cast in the show were never told this. I wouldn't say that this was all of their fault. A show with a budget like The Witcher has should be able to afford directors who can help guide less experienced actors to make it not so obvious that they have little experience, and the writers do have a lot to answer for, giving some characters some very wooden dialogue. But having all three things be a slight problem has made the whole thing one huge problem. In season 4 we get to know the rats a bit more. They are clearly ruffians and outlaws, and we know this because a lot of them have Cockney accents.
Sorry, can we just talk about what just fucking happened? That shit was mental!
All of them, regardless of gender, practice extreme mansplain, and if that wasn't enough, they all eat with their mouths open. No clearer way to announce that you're a ne'er-do-well than bad table manners and inability to sit in a chair normally. For more examples of this, see Blood Origin. Oh my god, the acting in that is, it's debatable. Side note as well, but I hate the whole depiction of the rats, and I'm definitely not looking forward to their show. Why that's needed, I don't know. But they come across as more rebellious uni students than they do people who have lived in the gutter all of their lives, and I think this comes down to bad directing and costumes. For example, every single close-up of them, they look pristine. Their makeup is on point with eyeliner, foundation, blush, and their teeth. I mean, you really want me to believe these Cockney rebels who have lived in poverty all of their lives have pristine white teeth? I don't have that, and I lived in a middle-class family all my life. It's just so immersion breaking. Their clothing is also just fine. It looks as good as some of the stuff Yaskia wears. There's just such a conflict with who they are meant to be and how they are portrayed on screen. If I'm honestly going to go there, but they feel like they've been directed by someone who has never lived a day of poverty in their lives. They've only watched Mary Poppins and thought Dick Van Dyke's portrayal of poor Cockneys is what makes a rebel, and this is what everyone in London apparently looks and sounds like. The Witcher also has a bad track record at portraying strong women, and I must emphasize that this is Mrs. WiseFish's writing at this point, and this is her words that I am speaking, as she perhaps has more authority to talk about the portrayal of women than I do, so please take that in mind when I'm saying all of this stuff. This is from my wife's point of view that I'm reading to you. There has been this really common trope flying around the past couple of decades of the warrior women. Always the one you'd underestimate, always skilled with weapons and fighting, and always sarcastic and moody, particular to other warriors. We are for some reason supposed to take this as being inspiring and subverting expectations. Well, that was the case during Return of the King when Eowyn took off her helmet and said, "I am no man," but that was 22 years ago now, and it was a scene taken from a book that was published 70 years ago. Why has a show that is showrun by a woman not evolved this stereotype at all? If anything, it has actually gone backwards. It is no longer surprising to see a woman take a perfect shot with a bow and arrow, or save the day proving all the men useless. I want to scream at the television, we can't elevate ourselves by pushing others down. The writing feels insulting at times, and interviews with cast and crew make it sound like women should be grateful that these one-dimensional characters exist. Of course, women should be portrayed as warriors too, but it is really obvious now that the writers are so self-conscious of it. Male warriors never really have to have a backstory or have something to prove or have other characters exclaim, "Wow, where did you learn that?" True inequality in the fantasy genre will only happen when warrior women are not treated as a surprise, but as just being simply part of the world. I understand that part of this is because of the original books, but they were originally published between 1992 and 1999 when warrior women characters were still surprising. It just seems odd that for a production team that doesn't seem to care that much about honoring the source material that they couldn't think of any other way to update those characters, and even I would argue that they are written in a more equal way in the books than they are portrayed in the show, which is a real shame. Back to my own words now, and all of these elements for me are just down to bad directing, and this seems to be a common thing with Netflix shows. HBO and Apple TV seem to really invest in good, established or upcoming directors, and it really shows in their programs. I mean, Game of Thrones had unknown actors who gave brilliant performances. You see them in other films or shows, and they're pretty poor at times.
The Hive haven't been on Earth in centuries. That wizard came from the moon.
Witcher has some great actors, but their performances fall flat because the way they are told to deliver the lines are just poor, matched with really awful writing at times. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm watching a university's production of Shakespeare. Evil characters are ridiculously over the top and have that bad guy voice if they get uncovered. Heroes always get that iconic shot, which by season 4 are just irritating at this point, and some jokes are just poorly delivered. Jaskier for me is just cringe at this point, and I know he's meant to be annoying, but sometimes I wish just one of his jokes actually made me laugh. Season 4 brings in the most baffling director's choice by giving him a full-on music video in the middle of the episode, which destroys all pacing, and it's just awful, just pure cringe. Honestly, it's making me think more and more that the directors are straight out of stage school, and this is what they deem is entertaining, adding a La La Land style music video to give Jaskier even more screen time for some reason. But yeah, maybe if there was a decent director, they could have made this writing work, but poor writing and poor directing makes some scenes fall flat and makes the actors look pretty poor regardless of their credentials. Talking of things that are a real shame about this series, there is of course the biggest talking point since the end of season 3, the departure of Henry Cavill. I think a lot of us completely understood Henry Cavill's decision to leave. He was a true fan of the books and games just like us, and was equally disappointed in the decisions the producers were making and the direction the show was going in. In my opinion, he did sadly make the right choice, and the backlash it caused against the show was justified and necessary. It clearly hit a nerve with the producers and showrunners because there have been all sorts of inflammatory and untrue statements put out about Cavill that were eventually backtracked on in later interviews and seemed to be the wake-up call they needed to start writing a true to the books show, which I must admit season 4 was actually quite faithful to the main plots of. The problem was it was just a little too late, and the recasting of the main character in a show really breaks the immersion for many audiences. Liam Hemsworth was brought in, and being fair, I was willing to give him a chance. It was not his fault at what happened with Henry Cavill, and if he did the job well, then fair play to him. When I sat down to watch the first episode of the new season, I wasn't there to hate watch. I was ready to go in and with no expectations. His portrayal would be different, that was to be expected, but unfortunately for Hemsworth, it did rather highlight for just how good Cavill was at being Geralt of Rivia in my opinion. It's not that he was specifically bad, he's actually pretty good at times, but there was something I felt that was not quite right about his portrayal. The first thing is that he is obviously younger than Cavill. It's only 7 years, but Cavill had also brought the fact of Geralt's age into his performance. He was battle weary, and it showed in his movements in the last episode of season 3. He wasn't as agile as he once had been. The injuries had piled up. Cut to season 4 and Hemsworth moves like a 35-year-old Australian, which he is. Hemsworth during his fights moves with youthful Australian agility, punctuated by occasional remembrances that he has injured his leg. I found the first episode quite funny actually because it reminded me a bit of the running joke in 40 Towers.
Subs would have to do it for free. I'll call him now.
Well, he won't be there on a Sunday, dear.
Well, then I'll call him at home.
Getting a bit of chip from the old leg this morning. Not to worry.
The other issue is his accent, and now don't get me wrong, he can do an English accent just fine, it's just that he didn't do the one I expected him to. I was worried going into this series that he would remind me too much of his older brother Chris Hemsworth in his role as Thor, but again I found it rather amusing that I didn't find this to be the case. He actually reminded me of an ashen-haired Prince Harry instead. I didn't know Kaer Morhen was linked to Eton, but that's the only logical way of explaining Liam Hemsworth's accent. Oddly enough, Henry Cavill attended one of the most prestigious schools in the UK, Stowe, and even he knew that Geralt absolutely would not have had that accent to match that level of education. Honestly, don't get me wrong, I think Liam actually does a pretty good job, and there are times where he does resemble what is in the books at times, but for me there's something lacking about it, and maybe that's because I'm a bit biased towards watching Cavill for 3 seasons in a row, but I don't know, there's something about Liam that just didn't hit the nail on the head, and that's really tough to watch a whole season when your main character, or what is meant to be your main character, just doesn't quite fit. Alright, so it's about time to wrap this video up, and I thought I'd end on something a bit more lighthearted, but still extremely important. Have you ever watched The Witcher and wondered what the hell is going on with some of the characters' hair? Triss's hair started out as the actor's natural hair. It was fine. It wasn't book accurate, but it wasn't a problem. The next season, the poor actor was given a terrible chestnut coloured wig. I think it was the same as the terrible chestnut coloured wig they put on Francesca too. It was just so obviously a wig, and we know that should not be a problem on TV in this day and age. They're normally made a lot better than that. The chestnut colour though was book accurate, so that's fine. We'll accept that Triss just dyed her hair whilst lying wounded on the Battle of Sodden. Cut to season 4 and Triss's hair is now as red as it was in the game. I thought they'd given up on inciting things from the game. So why is Triss's hair now red? Maybe it's because it's a slightly better made wig? God. I would also like to add in to this hair fiasco Emir. I have to be honest here and say I haven't found Emir's portrayal to be particularly memorable. In the games he has very few scenes, but their trick of using Charles Dance as a voice actor meant there was no way we were going to forget the Emperor of Nilfgaard in a hurry. The show version of Emir hasn't ever really felt like someone who would be able to make himself a mayor, let alone an emperor of a formidable state. So when in this season his first appearance was at a council meeting and his hair was cut short, I spent most of my time thinking, oh, it's cool to see James Purfoy in this, I wonder who he's talking to. He was talking to Emir. I just couldn't recognize him with a new haircut. I have never had this problem before. I mean, I could recognize Triss, but it really took a good while to remember what Emir looked like at all, and I really don't know how the show managed that. Finally, the worst hair crime of all goes to Jaskier. Of course, he's on the side of the resistance now, on the run since season 2, so he needs a look to match it. Cue long hair and eyeliner to make it really obvious that he's no longer mainstream. He's an artiste in a time of war. He has to look like one too. The only problem is he doesn't look like a rugged outlaw at all. He looks like Simon from the end of the In-Betweeners movie. Maybe that's on purpose. It's supposed to not work at all. It is Jaskier we're talking about. He is the comic relief, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, in all of my watch-throughs of the series, I don't think any other character addresses it, and he is one of the most easily joked about characters in the entire series. It seems like the perfect fodder for taking the mickey, but now the audience just has to sit there wondering if the producers genuinely think that Jaskier looks cool or not, and if they do, well then that probably fits with every other odd decision that they have made over the past 6 years and 4 very long seasons. And with that all said, thank you for watching this video. Give it a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. And please do leave your show criticisms in the comments, as I'm sure there are loads more that I haven't covered here. But I could talk about this for hours and just rant until the cows come home. But my God, I am so disappointed in the Netflix series. My final thoughts on the series as a whole is that it's a really cautionary tale to show creators about the importance of not ignoring a fan base and not thinking you know better than the original author. After watching season 4, I do think that they are starting to understand more how to make this show work, but it is all a bit late in the game really. Too much went wrong in season 2 and 3 for it to ever be truly redeemable in my opinion. What I do hope for is that Witcher 4, when it comes out, returns us to the quality of writing, design and production we were used to from this franchise before the TV show came out. Perhaps it will be exactly what we need for a bit of collective healing in this fan base. But anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for watching this video, including my patrons who support this channel through thick and thin, including my small fishes, my YouTube channel Wise One, Video Gamer 75, Sith Lord 906, Planet Nanontarian, V3XXC and Ethan Feldman, my big fishes Ben Chance, This Mind of Mine and Anthony Bonfiglio, my shark Dan F, my Megalodons Hazy Thoughts and Sinus, my incredible starfish Nanohertz. That is all for now though. Thank you once again for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers guys.